let me ask. Rick and I were talking this morning, and we were talking about a lot of these kinds of things. And he said he was having a conversation with an old friend who he hadn't spoken to, and that not surprisingly, all the people who'd gotten behind DeSantis were now scurrying to figure out how to get back in Trump's good graces. And I asked this question, Ruth, which is, what toll do the mental and moral gymnastics of this kind of stuff take on people? Because as Rick said, and I thought it was brilliantly put in a way only Rick could, at least when we wake up in the morning, we actually believe in what we're doing every day. These people don't.
Not only are they living a lie, the big lie and all the other lies, and having to say that this is what my Lucid post was about, corruption and holiness, having to say that truly, you could not find somebody more criminal in more ways than Donald Trump. And yet they have to say he's there by the will of God, he's a holy man, and all the alliances with the, Christian nationalists. So not only are they living multiple lies, but as we said before, they're supporting someone who put them in mortal danger and made it very clear that he doesn't give a crap about them. And that's how all authoritarian leaders are. They will happily send their people to war with terrible weapons like Putin is doing and old, bad rations. They have a use and discard philosophy about people. And they make that very clear. That's part of the ritual humiliation. They make it clear, as happened to Tim Scott, that they
ritual
don't.
humiliation. That's exactly the right.
That's
the right
what
word.
it is. Saddam Hussein did it. They all do it because they can. Now, our situation, in a funny sense, is more tragic for what you asked me about, the moral internal calculus, because we're not in a dictatorship. This is some old fart who has not even been in office for years. And they treat him as though he's an all-powerful dictator now. That's the incredible part. They're also scared of him. And we know this from, if you know any political insiders, they're crying secretly. They're saying they don't want him to really be elected privately. And these are people, the most powerful people in the nation, access to security. Many of them are wealthy, and they still can't come out and say their truth. So when Rick says, yeah, at least when we wake up, we're living our truth. And I can say the same. This is a terrible moral, psychological, emotional tragedy that we are living through.
So let me ask you something. Looking forward to a darker future, Ruth, let's, for argument's sake, say that Donald Trump is reelected in November, which is a possibility. How long does it take America to climb out? Is it 5 years? Is it 20 years? Is it ever?
It's really hard to say because it depends what happens. One of my mantras is never underestimate the American people. And if you still have elections, we saw this in Poland recently, there can be U-turns where if Trump engages in what he's promising to do, in widespread deportation, goes after millions of people of all sorts, takes away gay rights, there will be a reaction that could manifest in an election. So it could have a quick turnaround. It all depends what happens, because when Trump's now started talking about that there's going to be a terrorist attack, what I hear is, okay, I have a thing in Strongman about shock events. Whether the autocrat had anything to do with these shock events, like a terrorist attack, a rice shock fire, they exploit them to take away your rights. So we don't know what will happen and what the juridical and landscape and space for maneuver will be. When countries have gone into old-fashioned dictatorship and become one-party states that can take a year or two, then it's very difficult to get out of it.
Let me ask you this. Historically, it doesn't always, I mean, in some places you noted in Africa with Gaddafi, or Russia or China or wherever, it can be decades, right? In other places, it's like in Germany, 1933 to 1945, it's 12 years that take 75 years to get over.
Yes, and the only reason those dictatorships ended was that they flamed out and lost the war. Now, you could say it's inevitable that they went into these wars because classic fascism is imperialist. They have to expand. But any way, whatever length it is, it causes mass trauma. It succeeds in the first place because it's already caused division and hatred among people who used to live fairly peacefully. And that, of course, gets far worse. It's turned people against each other, created informers, all the mechanisms that authoritarians use. And then just think about, even now, he's not back in office, and we have tens of millions of brainwashed Americans who believe his lies. And I do want to say that for those who think that Trump is lazy, he has worked so hard as a propagandist that he has actually pulled off something that I don't have any parallel case I've ever heard of. Working in a democracy, totally open society still, pluralistic media, so he's not in a dictatorship. He succeeded in convincing tens of millions of people of a huge lie, something very easily verifiable, like who won the 2020 election. And yet he pulled this off, and they still believe it years later when he hasn't even been in office. Nobody has done that.
And I wonder, and because I've talked to some of these people who are even my friends who said, okay, well, it wasn't stolen, but boy, there sure were a lot of irregularities and something wasn't right, right? So you take the people who absolutely believe it was stolen from Trump, and then you add, 25, 50% of people, maybe 100, double it, Ruth, who think, well, okay, maybe it wasn't stolen, but, something fishy, and I'm not, I don't really trust anything anymore.
That's the other aim of authoritarians, to make sure you don't trust. And that's why I said before that everything they do is to take away our trust and faith in democratic institutions, whether it's the courts, whether it's Congress, or elections. And, Trump has been hammering for years now. Again, he works very hard as a propagandist to hammer the message that our elections are not safe, they're not reliable. And then you get people who come out and say the real thing, the real end game. Tommy Tuberville said, we just shouldn't have elections because they're just too compromised. There's too many things wrong with our electoral system. So then we return to, okay, if we're not having elections, then we're in a dictatorship. And so Trump is talking about being a dictator.
Tommy Tuberville, not exactly the Thomas Paine of our time. Okay, Ruth, as always, fascinating, enlightening, sometimes scary to have you. Where can everybody find you on social media, if you still dare to tread there, and where can we find your Substack?
So my Substack is called Lucid, and as in like clear thinking, not being brainwashed by autocrats. And it's a Substack newsletter, so lucid.substack.com. And I have weekly Q&As as well as publishing essays. I'm on Threads and still on X, battling it out with the fascists there at Ruth Ben Ghiat. And I have a website, ruthbenghiat.com, where I post my clips and you can know about my events and everythth else.
Absolutely. I have signed up for Lucid, guys. I cannot recommend it more highly. As always, gang, you can find me on Twitter and TikTok at Reed Galen, on Threads and Instagram at Reed_Galen_LP, and also on Substack at The Homefront. I hope you'll check it out. Ruth Ben Ghiat, thanks for joining me.
It's been a pleasure.
Everybody else, we'll see you next time. Thanks again to everyone for listening. Be sure to follow and subscribe to The Lincoln Project on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or however you listen. don't forget to leave a 5-star review. To connect with us, follow us on Twitter @Project Lincoln, and for more information on our movement, to join our mailing list, subscribe to our newsletter, or make a contribution to our efforts, visit lincolnproject.us. If you want to message the podcast directly, please send an email to podcast@lincolnproject.us. And if you want to personally join the fight to save our nation's democracy, visit jointheunion.us. For the Lincoln Project, I'm Reed Galen. I'll see you on the next episode.